our manager climate for climate finance program at WRI Indonesia, and Mr. Ian Hesak, the principal at Energy Shift Institute, Mr. Mark Mistry, the director of public policy and sustainability at Nickel Institute, Mr. Reza Ramadityo, our analyst at Energy Shift Institute, Mr. David Purba, Industrial Decarbonization Analyst at WRI Indonesia, and Mr. Zahedi Zakaria, the ESG Transformation Manager at Harita Nickel. We also extend our respect to the member of the media, the representative of the civil society organizations and think tanks, and all attendees joining today's webinar. Welcome to today's webinar by the Energy Shift Institute and WRI Indonesia, titled Indonesia's Nickel Tailing. Can the governance catch up with waste generations? Today's event is made possible by the collaborations between WRI Indonesia and Energy Shift Institute. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Latifatul Aziza, or you can call me Latifa. I'm a critical mineral analyst from WRI Indonesia. Please also note that today's webinar will be conducted in English. So for your convenience, we highly encourage you to turn on the caption feature at the bottom of your screen. Before we dive into the discussion, we will hear the opening remarks from Mr. Egy Swarga, our Senior Manager for Climate at WRI Indonesia. So please welcome Mr. Egy.
Yeah, thank you, Latifa. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, titled Nickel Tailings in Indonesia, Can Governance Catch Up with Waste Generation? First and foremost, I would like to extend our sincere appreciations to all of our distinguished speakers and participants for taking the time to join this important discussion. I would also like to express our gratitude to the Energy Shift Institute, or ESI, for the excellent collaborations in organizing this webinar. This event is part of our broader partnerships to strengthen knowledge exchange and policy dialogue on critical minerals governance. So we are truly valued for these collaborations and look forward to continuing our joint efforts in the future. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as many of us know that Indonesia is the world's largest nickel reserves and now rapidly expanding downstream processing industries, plays a significant role in this nickel ecosystem, mainly by supplying the materials, nickel materials, that are essential for energy transitions, including for the electric vehicle, batteries, and clean energy projects. However, the energy transition is not only about producing more critical minerals, it is also about ensuring that these minerals are produced responsibly. One of the most pressing challenges today is the management of nickel tailings, as the number of HPAL, or high pressure acid leaching, in Indonesia is increased and continues to grow. So the volume of the tailings is also expected to generate. Looking ahead, we can expect significant more HPAL facilities to come online over the next decade. And this means there is an urgency for us to establish a robust governance system for tailing management. Tailing management is far more than a technical or engineering issue. It is fundamentally a governance issue. Failures in tailing management can have devastating environmental, social, and economic consequences. Around the world, we have seen how tailings facility failures can damage ecosystem, disrupt livelihoods, undermine public trust, and expose companies and government to substantial financial and reputational risks. This webinar is timely, as it is intended to contribute by exploring both the challenges and the opportunities for strengthening governance in Indonesia's critical mineral sector. In particular, in relation to tailing management within the context of ESG implementations. And we do expect that today's discussions could generate constructive dialogue, practical insights, and actionable recommendations that can support the policymaking industry practices moving forward to address the challenges. Finally, I hope that this initiative like this will continue beyond today's event. Building responsible governance for critical minerals is not something that we can achieve through a single discussion. It is required a continuous collaborations, learning, and open dialogue among all stakeholders. We are committed to continuing these conversations and working together with partners such as VSI and many others so that we can generate a significant impact on responsible mineral mining and processing in Indonesia. With that, thank you once again to all of you, and I wish everyone productive and insightful discussions. Thank you. Over back to you, Latifa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Egi, for the opening remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, let us begin today's discussion with a context-setting presentation on the rising risk posed by nickel tiling in Indonesia. This session is titled Nickel HPAL Tailings, the Unfolding Environmental Disaster in Indonesia, and it will be delivered by Mr. Reza Ramadityo, an analyst at the Energy Shift Institute. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Reza.
Okay, thank you, Bu Latifa. Can you see my screen? No?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Reza, part of the ESI team. So yeah, first of all, happy to see many familiar faces today. David, Mark, and Pak Zahedi from Harita as well. Thank you for joining the discussion, and thank you to everyone participating. So today, we will share the key findings from our latest research on nickel tailings, which we have already worked on over the past 4 months. But with this limited time, I will focus on the key parts. So if you are curious, you can open the report through the link that will be shared later in this chat. So let's start with the first part. So to begin, I would like to show you the pace of HPAL expansion, which is the main driver to the issue. So in Indonesia, the buildup of HPAL plants has been rapid and massive. For instance, the first HPAL plant began operating in 2021, but 5 years later, now we already have 8 plants, and with at least another 8 on the way. And for those who not maybe familiar with HPAL, HPAL is one of the technology to produce nickel. It use acid leaching, which is different with conventional smelters. And HPAL is actually important piece of Indonesia nickel industry because it can process abundant low-grade nickel that conventional smelters cannot use. However, this process itself is very waste intensive. For every ton of nickel produced by HPAL, the process generates more than 100 tons of waste. So yeah, the ratio is quite big. Every 1 ton of nickel produce 100 ton of waste. And so as a result, you can see in the chart here, the waste coming from the nickel production is mounting rapidly. The chart show that it could increase from 10 to 15 times in over the next 10 years. So by 2035, the volume could reach nearly 2 billion by 2035 based on the higher estimate. And even if we use more conservative or lower estimate, we still reach around over 1 billion tons of tailing waste. And so to picture that volume, the volume is enough to cover the whole Jakarta area at 1 meter depth. So the waste is massive, and this waste commonly called as tailings in the mining sector. And under Indonesian law, it is classified as hazardous waste. So what are actually the implications of having this much of tailings? So to give you a bit of sense for this, the chart shows that today we have only around 0.1 billion ton of tailing stored in some of the industrial parks in Sulawesi or Maluku, and yet we have already seen three serious failures with 4 fatalities. So imagine that it is quite concerning to think what about to happens when the volumes get 10 times higher from now at 1 billions or even 2 billions by 2035. And yeah, maybe many of you wondering how the accumulation get so fast and rapid. So to explain that, this is the annual generation rate that is climbing fast because the new HPAL plants come online. So by 2030, it is projected that HPAL tailings alone will match or at least come near the rate that is produced by the entire mining sector that is reported in 2025. So, and to just further comparison, all of Indonesia domestic waste, that is our waste that come from household, office, public spaces, in total is about 30 million tons a year. So today, HPAL already produce more than that waste. But on the other side, you can see that the governance has not kept up with this space and also scale. As you can see in the photos, some storage facilities for these tailings are struggling to withstand the climate conditions. So the tailings are not kept in a good and safe condition. And the quality of practice also vary widely from one operator to another. So it is not surprising to see how one facilities can have like a better equipment and also better infrastructure while the other are not. And yeah, so the key reason to this is that our tailings regulation in Indonesia is outdated. Every HPAL operators publicly stated that they are using dry stack methods rather than like conventional dams, but the current regulation does not specifically regulate dry stacking. And on top of that, some facilities have been found operating without permit, so it is the problem of enforcement and oversight as well, beside the loophole in the regulation. So yeah, in conclusion, we are handling this much of hazardous waste with such a low standards, and this is quite dangerous if we continue the current situation. And yeah, we also need to remember that this waste is stored in wet tropical regions with frequent earthquakes. In the chart on your left, it shows that regions with most of the HPA plants like Morowali, Weda Bay, and Obi receive 6 times more annual rainfall than dry stack facilities elsewhere around the world. And yeah, this is among the wettest places in the country with rain on 4 days out of 5. And at the same time, these regions sit near active faults. For instance, you can see in the map there's a Metano fault in central Sulawesi near the HPAL plants that is shown in the black dots. So you can see there's some HPAL plants in East Luwu and also Morowali that is sitting quite near to the active faults. And there's also another fault in near Obi Island where a magnitude of like 7 earthquakes struck in 2010. So yeah, this is our challenge together to how to ensure the practice that is adequate to withstand this extreme condition. And yeah, to also emphasize again, nickel tailings is need more concern from all of us, is because the waste is inherently dangerous because of its physical and also chemical properties. The table compares the nickel tailings with copper gold tailings. The reason is that simply that in Indonesia, the tailings with comparable volume is copper gold tailings that is also at industrial scale. So to compare, for example, nickel tailings are disposed as a filtered cake, which is drier and denser compared to slurry for copper and gold. And this may sound safer, but actually, nickel tailings is fine grain, meaning that it's much harder to contain, to store, and also to handle safely. And nickel tailings also contains heavy metals, especially chromium, which under certain conditions, the chromium can turn into a form that is carcinogenic and also dissolve in water. So if the storage is poorly managed, it can contaminate the groundwater, rivers, and eventually end up in the sea. So yeah, to avoid these serious impacts from nickel tailings, our report proposed that Indonesia should update its tailing regulation. Um, the, this could be done by following international standards to adopt what is called a consequence-based or risk-based framework. And yeah, the idea behind this is quite simple. Under the framework, a storage facility should be regulated by the potential harm it could cause if it failed. So the greater the potential harm, the stricter the permitting and monitoring would be for the facility. So we are arguing that this would close the current loophole where dry stacking has no specific requirement and standards in the current regulation, because the current regulation only determine permitting and monitoring based on the storage type, which doesn't include dry stacking as a separate or specific type of storage facilities. And yeah, in addition, government can also set technical criteria for dry stacking to provide HPAL operators clear safety parameters on some of the important things like moisture content, stack height, drainage capacity, and so on. So coming back to this chart, just want to emphasize that if the current trajectories continue, we risk to scaling up the impacts we have already seen, that is 3 failures in just 1 year. And so to manage this risk, to avoid this runaway scenario, Indonesia can use the stronger regulation to reduce the sheer scale of the waste to make it more manageable. Because yeah, just imagine over a billion ton is simply too much to handle. Even with strong regulation, we have to ensure too many facility to build safely, and maybe the bureaucracy would be overwhelmed as well. So we should also reduce now the amount of tailings that is generated. And this could be done by enforcing the stronger regulation in the permitting system. So new HPAL projects should be reviewed properly. The government must ensure these plans can show compliant storage with sufficient capacity before they are allowed to start production. And yeah, in effect, I think this will make some projects to take longer to build, and maybe some other marginal projects may not be built at all. So in this way, for the production rate can be rationalized, we can avoid runaway scenario, and the estimate of this around 180 to 600 million tons can be avoided by 2035. And beside of that, stronger rules or regulation can also help the economics of recycling, because proper storage will cost more. So it will incentivize HPAL plants that doing recycling to avoid the high cost of storage. And however, this recycling is still like in the early phase, so reaching the commercial scale across the industry will need further support from government, like the economic incentives, and also easier permitting and so on. So yes, sorry. Taken together, these measures, if we implement stronger rules, review the new HPAL plants, and also enable recycling at scale, we can halve the total volume of tailings waste and make the rest manageable for safe storage. Yeah, the last one, I just want to emphasize that it is urgent to act now rather than later, because the cheapest facility to fix is the one that has not been built. And today, we still have time, because almost all facilities that will be exist by 2035 is not there yet. So we can optimally use this opportunity to improve, like by letting the storage facilities to set the pace in the HPAL project development. So we must ensure that every HPAL plant have their storage settled first before they start producing waste and managing it. So I think that's all from me. The full report is on the ESI website now. It is free, so you can, if you are curious, you can check it. It is online now in ESI website. So thank you, and look forward to the discussion after this. Back to you, Mbak Latifah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Reza, for your wonderful context-setting presentations. And ladies and gentlemen, after hearing the primary research finding, we can now see that it is not so beautiful, the reality of the HPAL tailing in Indonesia, but that also leave us room for improvement. And now it is time to transition into our most anticipated session. It's going to be a panel discussion on the theme containing the risk of nickel HPAL tailing from international standards to Indonesian practice. The session will be moderated by Mr. Ian Hisok. Mr. Ian is the principal of critical mineral at the Energy Shift Institute. So, Mr. Ian, I'll hand it over to you.
Many thanks, Bu Latifah. Hello, everyone. My name's Ian Hiscock, principal at Energy Shift Institute, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. I want to firstly say well done to Mas Reza on his presentation. That very interesting material there, and also I know how difficult it is to make such technical topics simple to understand. So I'm sure everyone here really enjoyed that. So moving to the panel, it's a great pleasure to introduce Mr. David Perber, Industrial Decarbonisation Analyst at WRI Indonesia, Mr. Mark Mistry, Director Public Policy and Sustainability at the Nickel Institute, and Mr. Zahedi Zakahira, ESG Transformation Manager at Harita Nickel. This panel offers us an opportunity to explore some of the tailing issues from different perspectives, from the perspective of industry, policy, and the environment. Mr. Perber will kick us off with a few slides that talk about tailing management regulations as they currently exist in Indonesia, and building a little bit on best approaches to closing gaps between national regulations and international standards. We'll then move into a more open question session with Mark and Paxahedi. So I think over to you, David, if you'd like to kick us off with some material from yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Ian. I hope everyone can see the screen now. So I will just make a small presentation here. I hope it will be short, but I hope it also can help us to go through the next discussions. Basically, we in WRI Indonesia have been done our ESG gap analysis. So basically, we are hoping to get to mapping out the alignment between our national regulations against the 3 global standards. We will share to you what is the global standards after this. But basically, over the 1 year since 2025 in August, we have done this gap analysis study with all of the ministries that regulates the ESG standards and regulations in Indonesia. And we find that there are 117 regulations related to the ESG management in Indonesia, especially for the critical minerals. And we assessed all of the parameters required in these 3 standards. We find that 42 ESG parameters, and we find 582 total compliance evidence being analyzed. So yeah, this is the reference standards that we have. Previously, we considered the asset performance standard as the representatives of the financial institutions. What's they required in terms of the due diligence, M&A, or merger and acquisitions, which basically globally used for that kind of transactions. We also benchmark with the IRMA standards, specifically representing the responsible mining assurance. So we hope that these standards can represent the mining operations and the standards for these mining operations. While for the smelters, we provide the benchmark with the copper mark and RMI as part of the standard requirement we analyzed. So this is the assessment framework that we have based on these 3 standards. There are 10 components of the ESG management system, starting from the policy up to the supply chain. We do believe that all of the participants here has been aware about this ESG management system. And we find that all of these components required by all of the standards, whether some parameters have all of 10 of it, several parameters have only 3 to 5 ESG management system components. We have scoring out the requirements because we want to find the gap and the score between the Indonesia regulations compared with all of these 3 standards. So we scored the mandatory regulations and requirement, and also we scored the voluntary regulations, such as the proper certifications and etc. So basically, all of the regulations that don't have any sanctions in it, we consider it as the voluntary regulations. And a bit disclaimer, we are not assessing or doing the gap assessment between the performance or real performance of this ESG management in the sites. What we are having done was we are analyzing word by word in our regulations, so it don't represent the actual conditions on how companies manage their ESG. It is only represent how the government Indonesia regulates the ESG and how close it is, how aligned it is with the ESG standards globally. We also validate all of these findings with 12 ministries, with 43 directorates. We having done the validations by 3 times with all of these ministries. So I hope it can be validated, and I hope you can use this as part of your guidance. So you can mapping out what have been done in Indonesia and what is the gap that need to be closed based on these national regulations. The main objectives for sure is we want to make it as efficient as possible for the company itself, because we already understand that we already have something in Indonesia. So you don't need to build everything starting from scratch, but we hope that you can integrate what's missing in our national regulations into the current deliverables or compliance evidence in Indonesia. And I hope this ESG gap analysis can also be part of our aim to ask the standards owner to understand what's being available in Indonesia, and hopefully that we can bring this as part of the equivalency with their standards. So we hope the company can use the deliverables, the permit in Indonesia, and put it as part of the assessment criteria. So yeah, based on our analysis, we find that Indonesia has 117 regulations related to the ESG. It's regulated across ministries, and it's also across the level of the regulations itself. So we find that there are for sure the consequences of fragmentation of these regulations, including the overlapping. We find that at least there are 3 to 4 regulations that overlapped with each other, and this might making the company need to be reporting or doing the analysis twice or thrice, so it will be make more complicated actions rather than doing the ESG implementation itself. And this is the alignment scores that we have for now. So in Indonesia itself, we find that the alignment score for Indonesian regulations, it's around 39% to 50%. It's different for each ESG standards that we have analyzed. And it's also different with the mandatory and the voluntary regulations. So as you can see here, we are not doing nothing in Indonesia. We have done something, especially on the ESG regulations. It's aligned partially with the expectations of global ESG standards, but we surely still have a lot of homework to do. But we also do understand that it cannot be done by the government, for sure. It cannot be mandatory for all. But yeah, again, the company should have something to do if they want to go to these standards and use that standards as part of their trade and etc. and transactions. But this is the current reality that we have, and I hope it can helpful. It can be helpful for the companies in Indonesia too. So this is the more detailed about the results. As you can see here, the environmental have bigger, consistently biggest score compared with social and governance parameters. And we also understand that this environmental helps a lot by the technical approval that we already have. The UNDL documents is very keen, or it's regulates a lot in terms of the environmental standards, but for the social part and governance part, we still have a lot of room to improve. And as you can see also here, IFC performance standards have consistently having more alignment compared with another standards, and IRMA it's consistently less compared with these 3 standards. IFC performance standards is more generic. They're focusing on the financial risk of the company itself, the portfolio that they have. So the standards they provide, it's more about the principality about that. There's still several methodological part or requirement, but not as much as IRMA standards. IRMA it's much more methodological. If we can say that IRMA it's more like a manager who is micromanaged, while the active performance standards is like as long as you can provide me that the risk is manageable, we can go with that. So that's basically the thing comparing these 3 standards. So related to the tailings itself, if we are going to this webinar theme, let me be fair before I'm very critical about that. This is not a country that does nothing, especially for the tailings itself. The contamination control through the hazardous waste regime is available now. We have the Ministry of Environment and Forestry Regulations number 6 2021. The permitting gates, our environmental impact assessment system, the AMDAL documents, PERTEC or technical approval are real. The reclamation guarantee is not just on paper. The ESDM or Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources has suspended around 190 permits last year for non-payment for this reclamation guarantee. The refusal of ocean dumping was ahead of some lenders. Even though we have the regulations related to the ocean dumping for the tailings, but in practicality, we also understand that the ministry it's not very easy to agree on this ocean dumping. That's why in Indonesia we have a lot of dry stack tailing facility and also tailing dam in terms of the management of tailings disposal. Also, ministry shows real enforcement willingness, and we also have transparency levers in proper and sustainable finance disclosure. So crediting this is not courtesy. It sets up a fair critic and it keeps operators in the conversations. So the rules exist, but they are spread across 4 bodies for sure now. The contamination and hazardous waste sit with the Ministry of Environment and its new Environmental Control Agency, BPLH. While for the mine engineering, reclamation guarantee, it sits with the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Large dams technically fall under Public Works Ministry, but those rules were written for water dams. It's not for tailings. While for sustainability disclosure, it sits with the financial regulator or OJK. Two things changed recently. The Environmental Ministry was restructured in late 2024, creating BPLH, and in early 2026, the BPLH ran the largest enforcement sweep in recent memory, reviewing over 1,300 mining units and suspending around 80 permits. This is a real momentum, but notice it is still reactive for now. We do believe it and we understand it. It is enforcement after breaches, not a preventive facility safety regime, and no single agency owns tailing safety end to end. So to make it more detailed for us, I surely do believe that you already know this even better than us, but let me show you what these rules actually require, because two instruments carry most of the weight. The first is the Environmental Ministry Regulations number 6 2021. It is treat tailings as hazardous waste. It defines the materials. It governs how we store, how to treat, how to stack, and how to dispose it. It controls about contaminations mainly. And impoundment needs a perimeter embankment, a spillway, upstream and downstream groundwater monitoring wells. There is regulation related to the line ponds and effluent limits. It's all folded into the environmental approval and technical approval. The second is the Energy Ministry Decree 1827 year 2018. It is the Good Mining Practice Guidelines. This is where some of the physics standards lives. It requires a geotechnical study. It sets consequence-based factor of safety table. The more severe the consequence of failure, the higher the required safety factor, with a ceiling in the probability of failure. There is genuinely good practice, but notice what neither one does. Regulation 6 of Ministry of Environment governs the chemistry of the waste, while the Ministry of Energy and Resource was written for mine slopes and rock dams, and it treats a tailing facility as a storage facility. So all of this geotechnical study, it is basically mandatory only for the mine slopes and rock dams, not for the tailings facility itself.
So sorry to just interrupt you here, Pak Pova. We're at 15 minutes now. So if you can wrap up in the next minute or two, that would be greatly appreciated. So we've got time for the other panelists to make their contributions as well.
Sure. I will do. Maybe we can share it in the discussion later about the standard itself, what it requires. But basically, this is what's the main gap in our regulations and in Indonesia. So every missing piece is a tailing facility safety construct. And if you make it in a very short, we regulate the chemistry, but we don't govern the physics itself. So it's the main gap that we have to be closed, but not really need to be in terms of the regulations itself. So in terms of the technology, we do understand that we already adopted the right technology, but it's still failing. There is already a case about that, but the gap is not adopting better technology. Indonesia already did. The gap is the safety governance system around it. So this is the pattern and example for that. What's the considerably cause of these failings? We will discuss it later. But for the solution itself, we already have it. All of these standards already provides the quite detailed standards, and it's also require the standards with JSTM. So it's convergence between each other. So it's really good to have like these standards as part of our guidelines in our company, because while doing so, we can meet all of these three standards expectations. So, but the standards aren't perfect either. The main problem is the team tropical guidance. It's very little standards level engineering guidance for filter tailings in monsoon and seismic settings. So this is the approach that we hope the operators can do it and the policymakers can do it. But this is what's the main idea that we want to do later. It's to provide the guidance. We don't need any new standards for sure, because we already have a lot of standards, but to guide the company to perfectly mapping out what's the deliverables need to be done, the study need to be done, the monitoring that need to be done. We will do it later, and hopefully we can work together with the company to make the guidance that practically can help the company to implement it in the sites. I think that's all from my side for now. Ian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ferber, for the detailed presentation. I can see there's lots and lots of content there, so I'm sure there's time in the Q&A to pick up on some of those different threads as well as after this session. I think let's perhaps move to Mark and Mr. Zahedi. And starting with yourself, Mark, I guess the first question I might have for you being, we've seen a lot of detailed material around Indonesia. Are you able to offer us a little bit of an international perspective on this? How are nickel producers elsewhere in the world managing tailings from HPAL or similar leaching processes?
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear. Yes.
Very good. Very good. So when you look into the membership of the Nickel Institute, I mean, first of all, we have a very strong focus on sustainability. So this is a topic which is at the core of our activities. And in our membership, we have on the one side, so-called sulfidic nickel producers. For them, tailings is also an issue, but it's a bit different than for those that are treating lateritic ores. And we have lateritic nickel producers in our membership. So when you look into, for example, production from Cuba, when you look into production from the Philippines, Australia, also Brazil, that would be nickel producers that are treating lateritic ores, going through a similar process, and they also have to deal with HPAL tailings. So it's not a topic that is new to us. Well, one important point, and I would like to link it back to the presentation of Reza, is the regional circumstances, the local circumstances, which play a critical role. To make it concrete, when you look into Australia and tailings management in Australia, it's a very dry, arid climate. So the problems that you face in Indonesia with the high seasonal rainfalls that might re-liquefy the dry stack tailings, is not a matter that you meet in Australia. The other thing is also that in Australia, things are relatively flat. So topography is relatively favorable, and we don't have any seismic activities. And these are all factors that you need to take into account to find the right technology in order to ensure that you can safely manage your tailings. The other point is, I mean, we heard in the presentation before some insights into the regulatory framework, which also plays a role. I think when I look into the issue from the perspective of our producers, many of our producers are also members of the International Council on Mining and Metals. So they are committed to the work that ICMM has done over the past years. So if I take the example of Sumitomo operating in the Philippines, they comply actually with GISTM, which is actually at the heart of the work done by ICMM. And I think, that's the path that many of our members follow, independent if they are producing tailings from lateritic or sulfuric ores. And I will leave it there for the time being.
Thanks for that, Mark. Very interesting. I guess bigger picture, more global perspective, and I think maybe moving to Park Zahedi to provide a more of a perspective from a producer. What are the biggest obstacles operators face in applying dry stack practices? So some of these acronyms we've heard today. Is it cost? Is it technology? Is it know-how? Regulatory uncertainty? Are you able to tell us a little bit more about how producers see this?
Yes, thank you, Ian. If you look at it purely on paper, of course, people would often point to the high upfront cost of capital as the biggest hurdle in having the dry stacking facility. But honestly, I don't see that cost as an obstacle at all. It's a necessary investment in operational resilience, I think, and environmental stewardship that we try to uphold. And framing it as a barrier will miss the point of why we are doing it in the first place, of course. The real challenge in our industry is, of course, just like Mark have shared, is climate adaptation. Because dry stacking itself is already proven around the world, but doing it in Indonesia in a tropical climate, high rainfall, also we have seismic active region in Indonesia, is a different problem entirely. It demands us to have a very specific convergence of technology and know-how. We are not simply buying off-the-shelf equipment of dry stacking, pumps, and whatever, and installing it. We also have to have the engineering, moisture management, compaction solution that have to hold up flawlessly, I would say, during seasons when conditions are at their most punishing, of course. Our dry stack tailing facilities a good example of what that looks like in practice. Applying this technology in tropical setting takes more than filtration, of course, equipment alone. It requires integrated approach, moisture management, engineer placement, and compaction, and also effective water management. All working together towards this is a long-term performance. Well, of course, doing a responsible contributing by byproduct management. So if I have to name the biggest obstacle, the single biggest obstacle is the learning curve of how to do dry stacking in Indonesia. It will push us operators to build real in-house expertise rather than leaning entirely from the contractors. Yeah, they will be the biggest obstacle that we will face. Thank
Many
you,
thanks
Ian.
for that, Park Zahedi. Very useful insights there. And maybe I'll just go back to Mark and ask, any sort of comments around expansions around that what does a credible tailings management framework look like in practice, I guess in a broader context? You're on mute, Mark, so just I want to pop yourself off of there. Yeah.
Thanks for reminding me. I think we already heard a number of things, but there are some buzzwords that usually occur when you talk about proper, adequate tailings management. One of them is good governance. So you need to ensure that actually within the company there's one person financially and legally responsible to ensure that actually tailings management is taken serious. You need to have competence within the company. So then it needs to be someone that is familiar with tailings management practices, an engineer that is looking after things on a daily basis. You also, and that is a very critical point, you also need to ensure that there's an independent party coming in to check things as to ensure that things are done in an appropriate way. The other point that we often also observe is, and this is not only related to tailings management, it's something that we see in other parts on ESG, which is to be transparent. So you need to ensure that you actually inform, that you talk, that you show what are the challenges. And the last 2 points that I noted down is, on the one side, you need to talk to your communities surrounding you. You need to talk to the local authorities, sit down, develop plans, prepare for the worst case, that in case something happens, that there are plans in place to ensure that communities can be protected, the environment can be protected. And the last point that you often hear, again, this is something that is coming up in ESG standards on a regular basis, is continuous improvement. The idea standing behind is that, you have to start somewhere, and you might not be perfect from day one onwards. But it's about, identifying risks and managing them over time. So no one is expecting that, you come up with the perfect solution from day one onwards. But the important point is to really sit down to see what are the risks and what do I have to do to actually ensure that these risks can be mitigated or eliminated.
Thanks for that, Mark. Lots of food for thought there. I really like the points about accountability, competence, having that independent review and transparency. Maybe back to Park. Zahedi, do you have any comments on those, and also maybe given the specific challenges that exist in Indonesia with climate and other things that you mentioned, are there any alternatives for managing HPAL tailings?
Yeah, Ian, totally agree with what Mark have shared. But I think we need to see the potential in this. The more interesting question would be, where do we store, or do we put this, but what we can do with it? As in industry, I think we need to stop looking at the byproducts purely as waste to be stored and start viewing them as resource to be utilized. The ultimate alternative, I think, not to have the better storage method, but to lean towards the circular economy. Of course, we now have knowledge of iron, where the content is quite significant in the byproduct itself. From the reports that Mas Reza have shared, that it says 40 to 50%. of HPAL tailings contents of iron. So we can go towards recovery routes, I think, that are already being tested, from direct reduction and magnetic separation into iron concrete concentrate, also to hydrometallurgical process that produce battery grade iron phosphate and also upgraded iron making feed. Um, Although none of these are already running at the full commercial, same as in Harita, we're also doing some piloting towards this. But getting there means solving the real technical problems of the storage itself. We're bringing this into the direction where the Indonesia itself, interestingly, is a major steel customer. So you can see in the future if we can utilize uh, this so-called waste into circular economy become something that useful and also meets the needs of Indonesia as a major steel consumer, is would be a great thing to look at in the future.
Thanks for that, Park Sahedi. And it seems like a very interesting area, iron recovery, particularly as you say, given Indonesia has a vast mineral endowment, but it doesn't really have large deposits of iron ore. So with a growing steel industry, that could be quite interesting. Um, I wonder, I guess, do you have any sort of thoughts on how commercial that recycling would be, and also perhaps more broadly, what would government policy look like to strengthen industry practices, but also perhaps encourage or incentivize some of these these recycling um, uh, options or possibilities like iron recovery from HPAL tailings.
We would want to see the policy move into direction at once, of course. The first one is to have science-based baseline for dry stacking tailored to tropical and seismic environments to suit Indonesian operation, of course. So every operator is held the same standards of structural integrity. This is the very important one to ensure the safety of the operation, of course, to be a responsible operation. And the secondly is to have the innovation incentive. If an operator invests in R&D, for instance, to convert HPAL tailings into recovered iron or other secondary materials, policy should accelerate that, not slow it down, not to have contradictory policy, of course. Maybe can have like a demand side support, like procurement standards that create market for recovered iron, and also there will be a natural feedback loop where is raising the real cost of compliant storage make recovery more economically attractive, since every ton that recovered instead of state self the that instead of the stacked safe, there's cost of filtering, compacting, and also eventually closing the material. So we can have this cost compensate with the economic potential that we will gain from having the byproducts into circular. So with the storage standards right and incentive to recycle follows, I think it will have synergies between having the environmental protected and also have like a stimulus for the companies and operators to lean toward innovation. This is interesting opportunities then where we see rather by saying byproduct solely or something that needs to be managed, we see opportunity to create value through research, of course, in collaboration with scientific and regulatory institutions, provide any use of means of technical on also environmental requirement, of course, with the international standards and also that applies.
Thanks, Park Sahedi. And I guess back to Mark here, and we've talked about the importance of of local conditions in Indonesia, climate, topography, and seismic activity, and obviously the local regulatory conditions as well. I guess how do we think about the interaction between global practices and Indonesia, but this could be any country. So we've got a body of work from different places which talks about best practices. How do you sort of see that transferring between, I guess, the global level, but then to the local level, whether that be Indonesia or other places. So maybe you can tell us more, Mark, about how you sort of think about that interaction.
Yes. Before I answer that question, I would like to comment on what Pak Saidi said, because I fully agree, and I think it also became apparent out of the slides that Reza presented. It has to be, an effort where, on the one side, the amount of tailings is reduced. So circular economy, looking for alternatives for reusing the tailings is a part of the solution, besides ensuring that whatever occurs is actually safely managed, as the amount that occurs in Indonesia is huge. And on top of that, we also have to acknowledge that, this is not widely spread over the country. Because I had this very nice slide where you could see that there's a very high concentration on some hotspots, especially in Sulawesi, in North Maluku. So it means that, it's different than elsewhere in the world, where if I take the example of Chile and copper mining, where you have different deposits being spread over the country. So it needs to be a joint effort where you seek for different solutions, and recycling is actually one part that also needs to play a role in the future. That's one point I wanted to mention. When it comes to the global practices, I think, from our perspective, we are looking into GISTM. So it is actually a standard or a guidance that was developed in a joint effort between industry, between the United Nations Environmental Program, as well as PRI. So that is for us the benchmark. And when you look into the concrete content of GISTM, it's not really going down into the details of the technologies and the local circumstances. It's more describing what needs to be done, what are the measures, so the principles, but also the measures that have to be undertaken. ICMM published last year a guidance which is more concrete to its members. But again, it's not going into the details that it says for dry stacking, you have to apply this and that, and you have to do this and that. It's more describing what needs to be done in general terms. I think the important point is that Indonesian companies, and I think, that is one of the key messages I would like to leave here. There are global industry associations like the Nickel Institute, like ICMM, where we are sitting together, where we are discussing these things amongst peers, and where we are exchanging on, what are best practices. And that is something that also needs to be taken into consideration. Indonesia is very specific. The circumstances are maybe not what you meet in other parts of the world, but these are technologies that are also applied elsewhere. And this is actually the benefit that we see in joining industry associations, where you have the possibility to exchange with peers, to learn from them, to sit down and to see what can be done.
Many thanks, Mark. Maybe if David is still on the line, are you still there,
Yeah.
David? Yes. But maybe if we can bring back David into this conversation. Do you have any? You've listened to the answers and discussion between Mark and Pak Zahedi. Do you have any comments on that? The interaction between the local and the international practices and standards?
Yeah, it's quite dilemmatic and for sure related to how to regulate this for sure. Because we don't want the ESG standard itself to be so rigid and too details. Because the tailings itself, the same with all of the parameters, it's very specific for each locations. Even if you're talking about the seismic activities, it's very different compared with the others. The current conditions of the tailings locations, it's also very different. The ore will be different based on the characteristics of the tailings, the TCLP results, and also the characteristics of the tailing itself. It will be so different. So the principle of how the ESG to be managed is on the objective itself, how to ensure that the objectives is specifically stated, what's the impact that need to be seen, to be analyzed, to be assessed, and the mitigation measures can be part of the specific consideration of each companies. And for sure, as Mark said previously, the main problem is how to ensure that all of the considerations, including the mitigation measures using the mitigation hierarchies, it's well documented and it can be shared. It can be shown by the companies that all of this mitigation measures provided can reduce all of the residual risk, make it as much as possible. And the regulation itself, we have to understand that by making this mandatory standards, I think it will bear the companies a lot of responsibilities and a lot of problems, even for sure without the national capacity to achieve that. So as we said previously, if we make it details in terms of the standards and regulations, who will be the one who assess this? It's also the problems for sure. So the biggest homework for the government itself is to provide the independent assurer. So the company can just go with this, because the main problems with the ESG implementation is how to ensure that there is a certain people that understand a lot about the engineering and also the implementation itself. Yeah, so that's the main considerations that we have. There's a lot of homework for sure, but we do believe that specific for Indonesia, the main solutions that we have now is to create a specific guidance, not creating like pushing the government to create the regulations. Government have to be the one to provide support, not just making it mandatory and pushing the sanctions to the company, but they have to start with the providing the capacity needed, the incentives needed, and the guidelines that can be used for the companies to provide the better implementation. Yeah. I think you are mute, Ian. Ian.
Thank you, David. Thanks for those additional comments. So we're now going to move on to the question and answer session portion of this webinar. So to our audience, we just heard from cross-stakeholder perspectives on containing the risk of the stems from nickel HPAL, and some of Indonesia's regulatory gaps, international standards, and how they interact with local conditions, as well as the technical realities of making dry stacking safe in Indonesia. Now is your chance as the audience to ask questions to the experts. I know some of you have already dropped those into the chat box. If you haven't, please do so. All questions for this Q&A will be collected in the Zoom chat box, please type directly into that box along with your name and affiliation. I won't be using the raise hand feature for this session, and please accept our apologies in advance if we're unable to answer your question in this session, as we only have some limited time. But before we jump into that, let's just welcome back Mr. Reza Ramadityo, the lead author of ESI's paper on HPAL tailings and the context setting presentation presenter. So, Master Reza, welcome back. So we've already got some questions from the audience. We've already got quite a lot of questions from the audience. So thank you so much for participating and engaging. The first question comes from Rafi Seba, and the question is for HPAL tailings governance, it is the main challenge government capacity to monitor, evaluate. So I think this is perhaps probably talking about are the gaps between regulations and standards and implementation, and maybe we can start with Pak Zahedi. Did you have any comments or responses on that?
Sorry, on which question, Ian?
So
I opened the Q&A box now.
So the question is the main challenge the government capacity, or is a significant challenge government capacity to monitor and evaluate? And so my interpretation of this question is really around the differences between regulation and standards and implementation.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge itself for the governments to understand the best practice of the facility itself. The localization of the knowledge, not many examples that already have the best practice in terms of operational of the DSTF. Of course, because the DSTF itself, not only talking about that we have good geotechnical design, that also like we have sensors and others equipment, but also to have discipline operations, because Indonesia climate is very challenging. We know we have high rainfall, although not only to rely on the government to monitor, but the operator itself needs to understand the level of the mitigation that they have to apply in their operations.
Many thanks, Pak Zahedi. Mark, do you want to add anything on I guess the difference between regulation, policy, and then implementation and monitoring?
Yeah, I think one observation that we made is the regulation in Indonesia might be lagging behind, but we see that. I mean, we were talking right now about tailings guidance and standards, and we touched upon the relevance of tailings management in ESG frameworks. So we can see that when we talk about HPAL processes, we are talking about nickel that is foreseen to go into the automotive, into the batteries value chain. We know that the batteries value chain is very sensitive when it comes to ESG issues, and that right now, if I take the example of Europe, the European Battery Regulation, if I take the example of the Global Battery Alliance, there are ESG requirements being formulated. And that means in consequence that if you want to participate in the global markets when it comes to EV batteries, if you want to sell your nickel into these value chains, this is going to become a criterion. It will become relevant. Yeah. So I think it's I mean, this is the reason why we see right now in Indonesia so many companies looking into the issue, as these companies experience pressure from their customers. And that's maybe the important point. It's not only the customers, but also investors who actually want to ensure that the nickel that they are purchasing or the company in which they are investing is actually dealing with things in a responsible way. So I would say, it would be good if things are complemented on the governance side by regulation. And I think that the Indonesian government is looking into that. But we see that with implementing ESG standards, company acknowledge that they must do something about proper tailings management.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark, and but very interesting to bring up. I guess the push from manufacturing, from industry, notably automotive, and how that might push standards upstream into mining and processing, so that companies are doing this voluntarily. Maybe just to hear from Mas Reza, do you have how do you think about I guess the balance between what's necessary from regulation and monitoring by the government, and by coming from industry where manufacturers are demanding higher standards and traceability. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, sure, Ian. Thank you. So maybe first, to start, I think I just want to like make us all remember about the Brazil conditions, the Brazil case, where the regulations is many improvement in regulation happened after the incidents in Brumadinho and also Semarco, and we surely don't want to repeat the same case, right? In Indonesia, now we already have many HPAL come online, and like Mark said as well, the regulation is lagging behind. So, but in another side, I think stronger regulation will also create some trade-off. It will make operation much more complex, and also, like David said, like we still have many homework in ESG, not just tailings. I think in nickel industry, so many problem. I mean, like so many things to improve as well, like in the carbon footprint, deforestation, tailings. So imagine that if yes, we need to make a stronger regulation to avoid some major accidents to happen. But in the other side, in pushing this all at once, carbon, deforestation, safety, tailings at once will create a huge pressure for the industry as well. And on the other side, maybe some improvement in this ESG performance can also bring benefits for companies that are trading its good to the international supply chain, automakers, and so on. But I think we need to prioritize. We need to like make this strategic move. Government should like think about what are the strategic steps that can be done in the short term to bring the benefits for the competitiveness and also to improve the ESG performance as well. So I think, yeah, the reason to balance this is just like take action soon and also make a strategic step on which priority that we want to address in the near future.
Thanks, Ms. Reza. So yeah, bringing focus and prioritization rather than trying to address too many things at once. I'm gonna move on to the next question now. So thank you all to the audience for putting your questions into the chat. We're going to take a question now from Nafianto Pangidang. and I don't think we're going to answer all of your questions here, but maybe we'll have a go at the first two. So probably starting with David. Mr. Nafianto's question is why are nickel tailings and operational waste hazardous when discharged into water? And what are the technical challenges of managing that?
Yeah, it's quite complicated questions for sure. I prefer the previous questions to answer, but let me answer this quite quick. So first of all, the hazardous waste is we define it based on the TCLP for sure and the concentration level. So we have the standards on TCLP and also TK or tingkat konsentrasi. So if the waste it still has the TCLP considered as hazardous, it might be considered as the hazardous waste. The main consideration has
sorry, David, can you just tell me what is TCLP?
TCLP is leaching parameter. So this is the concentrations of the parameters or chemicals, heavy metals in the leach water of these tailings. So that's for that. So the level of the TCLP and concentration level will determine what types of management or techniques that need to be done in Indonesia. So if you want to have like a disposal, you might have like the concentration level has to be lower than several parameters. So that's the main things that regulated in Indonesia for now. So, and it's quite makes sense in terms of that because in perspective of Ministry of Environment, they are more about the pessimistic because they are the environmental regulators. They are more about not having and find the opportunity. They're more about how to ensure that the safeguard is made here. So they want to ensure that the pollutions avoided as much as possible. That's why the tailings it's considered as the hazardous waste itself. The technical challenges for sure. The first one related to the moisture content, as Mas Reza previously said, it's quite dilemmatic for the moisture contents because the characteristic it's for our tailings it's fine materials, it's claying, so it's very hard to make it the moisture content less than 25%, 20%. That's why in Indonesia, typically we aim to get 25 to 35%. And also the dilemmatic one is if the fine materials have the moisture content less than 20%, it will become a dust. So it will be another problems related to the dust management. So it's a dilemmatic one, and we have to find the right answers for this. And another one is related to the stacking itself. In Indonesia, we have a tropical season. We climatic characteristic that it is rainy over the year. So ensuring that having a specific procedure on stacking the dry one as the perimeter and the foundations, we can make the more wet tailings inside of this perimeter. So I think it's the most important one to find the schedule to stacking the dry one into the perimeter and the wet one in the inside of this perimeter. So that's the most important thing as the best practice that we find. Previously, I'm working as an environmental engineer for the engineering consultant. So we have reviewed a lot of this feasibility study and design for the tailings facility, and I can say that very limited companies in Indonesia that have a very good tailings facilities. We have to give a big applause for Harita for sure. It's one of the a best practice in terms of dry stack facilities in Indonesia. I can say that based on their performance. So yeah, we cannot have a very generic answers for that. As I said before, specific methodology it's not the right answer from our perspective. The biggest one is how to ensure that the same objectives to be done, ensuring that the engagement with the communities, having them to understand what's the results, what's the reason behind the management, it's really important. So the government will not be alone in monitoring this. The company, the communities will be part of this management too. I think that's all, Ian.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Perhaps moving on to another question from Marathi Abdullah, and this is about whether the government regulator could use the tailings capacity standard compliance as a consideration for approving. I presume this is the RKAB, the amount of ore production that a miner is allowed to or permitted to extract. So perhaps we can start with yourself, Mas Reza. Do you see that as being a potential lever for raising the standards in this space?
Yeah, I think the issue with this is that I think majority of the HPAL operators are not miners. Like we can see most of the RKB, the mining quota is applied to the miners in Indonesia. Meanwhile, many of the HPAL operators owners are just a standalone processing facilities in industrial parks. So I cannot see this approach, the linkage between regulating the RKB and also as a tools to control the good tailings practices. But yeah, so I think we need to find another approach. I think maybe like with the report, one of the report that we suggest is to apply tooling between the good tailings practices with the permitting of the HPAL plants itself. So yeah, I think it is like a better position in this case.
Many thanks for that, Reza. Anything to add to that, Pak Zahedi?
Yeah, I totally agree with Reza. I think although will be really interesting to see the development towards of course how the regulation will become, and also getting back to what David has shared before, that having too many standards of course would contradicts with the purpose of having a good practice itself. We should lean towards what can be done together, and also what benefit we can achieve towards the initiative itself, rather than having more restrictions and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Many thanks. And another one for you here, Mr. Zahedi. What one participant is asking about the economics of iron phosphate or iron recovery. Are you able to say a little bit more about this?
Can. Because what we have now is still on lab scale, of course, but the result is actually quite good. If I'm not mistaken, we have like 75 to 90% something of recovery rates, depending on the methods, of course. But what's missing is, of course, to have it on the industrial scale. So not only that, we need to also consider the specs when it comes into the steel metal, because we know that there are certain specs that buyers requires, that so that it becomes the standards that they can procure. So my understanding would be yes, they will be very interesting to have some government supports, whether there is subsidy and also compensations. But yeah, we need to have more like a demand side measure, which is more important towards this iron recovery or for iron phosphate things that we will go forward. So that we're not subsidizing a thing that not coming into the specs that anyone wouldn't buy. This is actually the most important part that we have in our homeworks first uh, before we can move forward into the scale itself.
Thanks, Pak Zahedi. Any further comments on that, Reza, on the economics of iron recovery?
Yeah, I think I agree that in this case, government should also support the industry. So it's not only applying restrictions over and over, but also government can also push this initiative from the demand side because the iron recovery from the tailings from the current research is showing that the specification, the quality is lower than the primary ore, the iron ore. I mean, so competing, finding a big enough market for these products is, even though we have like 1 billion, 2 billion ways that can be converted into, let's say, how many, like 500 million iron ore, for example, it's hard to find the market for this because of there is iron ore is not like a nickel that is limited. Iron ore is maybe everywhere. Maybe many countries have the deposit, many have the reserve for this. So I think the government should step in for this, creating market. For example, government maybe some projects, government projects or government companies can uptake these products from the nickel industry, the iron ore, or maybe government can also like take some industrial policy like to protect this production to happen. For example, like imposing like exemption for the taxes or export levies for the iron recovery product, so it can compete. It will reduce some of the cost, so it can make it lower the price compared to the primary iron. So I think that's I think the addition for me.
Yeah.
Many thanks, Mas Reza. We'll now move to a question from Dia Paramita. And I'm going to take a little bit of poetic license with this question and maybe send it to Mark first. I guess that this question is really around the level of disclosure or publicly available information. Are you able to say something about how that compares, how this nickel HPAL in Indonesia and the level of information and I guess transparency compares with other mining operations and in the world? And don't forget to unmute yourself as well.
We haven't said anything yet, so yeah, good question. I think that when you look into what GISTM or ICMM require, then transparency is a very important aspect. When you look into ESG standards, which relate to, for example, GISTM, then companies that go through as ESG standards will also be required to talk about tailings management and what they are doing. And I think that we know that the Indonesian nickel industry is relatively young. It's a junior industry. It's good to see that companies like, for example, Harita take the lead. We know that there are other major producers in Indonesia that also look into the issue and start to be transparent. When we look, I mean, if you for example Google what Sumitomo does, what Vale does, Glencore, you will find information, as it is an essential part. And therefore, that's the expectation that Indonesian nickel producers are also following the examples of the likes of Harita, and that they are transparent on how they deal with tailings, what the risks are which are identified, and how they plan to mitigate these risks.
Thanks, Mark. Anything to add to that, Zahedi, on, I guess, the disclosure, publicly available information, and I guess differences between different producers?
Yeah, Harita itself already doing some homeworks towards adhering the international standards. Yeah. Currently, we also have been audited by IRMA and also have been doing RMAP and RMAP Plus, which is not an easy task to have as in our operations because. Yeah, as you already know that we not only have mining on our side, but we have the integrated processing of the nickel industry itself. So that is a challenge that we take, and also we see this as an opportunity, not only for us to keep our commitment, but also to have the commitment being verified by the standards. So, by that said, that we're not saying that we do this thing this way, but we have another standards to compare what we have done and maybe telling us the gaps where to improve and where we do next and what can we achieve to have a better and better and continuous improvement towards of our operations.
Many thanks, Pak Zahedi. And I'm going to start to wrap this Q&A up. Thank you to the audience for all your fantastic questions and comments as well. I think what I'm going to ask the panelists to do is just to give me a 2-3 sentence final thoughts, last word, and maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Perber. Where would you like to, if there's one message, key message you want the audience to take away today, what would that be?
Yeah, I think the main takeaway that we can find as Indonesia regulations and government, it's not doing nothing. We are doing something, but we still find a lot of gaps on that. And how to close these gaps, it's not necessarily in the mandatory regulations, because it's bear a lot of responsibility to the company itself. The government comes up with the opportunity first. They have to come up with the support to necessary to the companies before making it mandatory for them. They need to increase the capacity of the government itself first, and how to ensure that the opportunity becomes part of the regulations and the policy itself. As we already know, even for the recycling, hazardous waste, recycling is also still challenging in terms of regulations because there is a technical approval for utilizations, and it bear a lot of additional risk and actions for the company. So I think the transformation need to be start with the perspective of the government to see all of this impact and all of this opportunity. I think that's all from my side. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, David. And Mark, get a couple of final thoughts.
So I think first of all, it's a requirement that is not for the time being driven by regulation in Indonesia, but it's a requirement that we see coming up from the customers of the nickel industry. We see it coming up from the investor community. So if you want to maintain market access, or if you want to gain access to the global markets, you need to deal with the issue. The second point is, to come back to one of the central questions of this webinar today, is there a need to tailor something to Indonesia? I think what became apparent is that there's existing guidance available on which Indonesia can build. So there's no need to adjust things. It is important to acknowledge that in Indonesia, we are meeting some very specific local and regional circumstances. Yeah, and the third item is, you're not alone. It's a matter that other industries, other nickel producers are also facing. And as said, as Nickel Institute, together with ICMM, we are looking into things, tailings management on the one side, but also circular economy and how eventually markets can be generated.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Over to you, Park Zahedi.
Thank you, Ian. For final thoughts, I think the story of the HPAL tailings shouldn't be a story about waste. It should be a story about what potential that we can harness. The scale of the challenge, of course, it's real. Indonesia climate and geology make this genuinely harder than anywhere else in the world has helped to solve it, of course. But hard doesn't mean unsolvable. It means we need to hold ourselves to a higher standards than what work elsewhere. Getting there means moving on three fronts at once. First is tighten the storage standards, so every facility is actually built for the conditions it operates in. Keep pushing the science on recovery, so today's byproducts will become tomorrow's resources. And will be nice to ask policy to reward the operators doing this right rather than just policing the ones who aren't, of course. We don't see this as a burden the industry has to carry. We see it as the thing that will define which companies lead the next phase of this industry. The ones who treat responsible tailings management as core of how they operate and not an afterthought to production. Yeah, there will be the final thoughts on takeaways that I will share.
Thank you. Thank you, Park Zahedi. And over to you, Mas Reza, for final thoughts. Just a couple of sentences.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think for the closing, I just want to emphasize the urgency of acting now. I mean, we can have hundreds of discussions like this, but what actually create progress is our implementation on the ground, right? Whether it is like government doing the first move on settling in some guidance or regulation or whatever, and the communities can also collaborate with actors in the ground, monitoring the progress, and also the industry itself maybe can collaborate with the academic university research to exchange knowledge, and also improve doing some innovation on how to do this properly and also effectively. So I think there's so many ways. There's no single approach to solve this waste problem. It can be reduction, like recycling. It can be safe storage. I think all of these have to do at once. So yeah, I think we need to start now. It's the main point.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mas Reza. Very, very clear. And thank you to all our panelists for your valuable insights and joining this webinar today. We're really grateful for your time and your energy. So clear to me that this is a very important issue. It's a very complex issue, and there's lots of things to take on board today. Not least Reza's final word that on this specific tailings issue in Indonesia and the scale of it, that there's probably an urgent call to action as these facilities ramp up. I'm going to pass over to Bu Latifa in a minute. So thank you to the audience for your attention. We're grateful to you for your questions and active engagement, and that's the end of the panel discussion and Q&A. So it's been a privilege to moderate this conversation, and I'll now hand back to the MC to wrap up today's event. Bu Latifah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian, for wonderfully moderating our fantastic panels. And also, I would express massive thank you to all our panelists for such a thought-provoking and critical discussions that we have today. So if I might summarize, I think I would quote Mark Mystery on his thought, on his ideas that is a continuous improvement. And one of the biggest milestones is to identify the risk. So I think we all agree that we now have 10 steps ahead of everybody, that we are currently identifying the risk and we have a clue on which direction that we meant to head on. So I hope that this kind of discussion is not going to be our last discussions, but we're going to be moving forward to the betterment of the Indonesian nickel industry. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the final segment of our event. But before we officially wrap up, I think it will be lovely to capture a virtual group photo together. So I would invite all the moderators and the panelists to turn your cameras on, and we will capture the group photos together. All right. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to an end of our today's discussion. And before we log off, we kindly remind all participants to fill out the attendance form that is already being put in our chat box. And also, you can access today's material, the latest report from ESI on the tailings, and also the report from WRI ESG Gap Analysis Report. And all the links have been put in the chat box. So once again, my name is Latifah, and on behalf of all the organizing committee from WRI Indonesia and the Energy Shift Institute, I would like to apologize for any shortcomings during today's event, and thank you all for the wonderful presentations, and have a great day. Thank you.